Could you please hurry up? Stop loafing around like a kid going to school. At this rate, we're going to be late, and believe me, you'll regret it if I'm late for this trip. You won't like me when I'm furious." Was that the news? I sighed, struggling to hold on to 3 heavy-wheeled suitcases and heading in the same general direction we were walking down the promenade. We had a good 30 minutes before the gangway would be raised. The new Tower Harbor, protruding into the Thames, was a new pier built specifically for cruise ships. We still had a long way to go, but at any rate it wasn't 30 minutes. "I'm trying my best," I muttered. "Just do it. Don't try, just do it." She misquoted the meme again. She was trying to be on the same page as the teens and keep up with modern, or at least slightly recent memes, but she wasn't very good at it. No, for me right now, don't try sounds like a good option," I said calmly. "I could use a rest." She stopped, straightened to her full 5'2" height, and took a deep breath. That was always interesting, as it pushed her already impressive breasts even further apart. Passers-by noticeably slowed their step to appreciate the view. Some of them stopped completely. Mrs. Keeley Gateshill, my wife, was a miniature Venus with a Mother Earth figure. Artists in primitive cultures would have fought each other to the last stone for the privilege of sculpting her. Admittedly, the sculpture would probably look like a lumpy plasticine model of the Michelin Man from a tire commercial. And my wife was much more attractive, but the size of her breasts would probably be proportionate. Her pale blue eyes flashed. "William Gateshill, you know how much this trip means to me, and I'm not going to let you sabotage it at the last minute just because you're cranky." The tone seemed a little harsh. "I wouldn't call it annoyed," I protested softly. "In fact, it's more like mild resentment. We agreed to this cruise, and we're going to have a hell of a vacation on it. I seem to recall that you agreed to it unilaterally, despite my protests that I was busy and not much of a traveler. You bought the tickets, picked out a cabin, and decided to tell my boss that I needed a break from work. Again, despite the fact that I was busy. It doesn't matter, you can just give up playing on your computer for a while. You know I've been working hard all year, too. It's not just that you're working. Or is it the case that I'm a woman and therefore my views don't count? That my needs aren't important? That my work is of lesser value? That you think I should be barefoot, pregnant, and in your bed all the time to serve you and do your bidding?" Now she was shifting into her abrupt dwarf step. I thought about what she had said. "Can we talk a little more about your servicing me?" I wondered. "That sounds like a nice thing to say. I mean, it's been quite some time since any servicing, as you put it, has taken place. Am I just a walking prostitute to you? What the hell is going on with you? Life isn't just sex, and more sex. Is that all you think about?" "No, honey, most of the time I just think about having sex. More sex would require quite a bit of imagination," I commented thoughtfully. "That was quite a long time ago, and even then it was almost a local remake of The Grudge, without any hair on my head. I was only partially glad for that. I didn't like mouth hair, but I didn't mind it when we were first married 7 years ago. She had a gorgeous blonde mane that we both loved for me to hold on to when we made love doggy style. Then that hair became too unfashionable for her job, and that was it. One day, shortly after she started working for an architectural firm as an office manager, that gorgeous golden waterfall was replaced with a stylish business short haircut, and without any warning. I didn't really like her short haircut, but I knew better than to say so. If I wanted to start World War III, it would be easier to just point out that the short, tight skirts of the business suits she was carefully selecting online at the same time made her ass look fat. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and looked at the time. 25 minutes left. Great. We were definitely on schedule. Keeley saw me looking at my phone and turned to leave. "Wait," I called out. "I want to take a picture of you at the beginning of the trip." The view was quite picturesque. She was standing under a large, arched sign welcoming people to the pier, looking charming in her sky-blue dress, her lovely face shadowed by a large, wide-brimmed straw hat, her red and white ribbon fluttering softly in the wind. Behind her was the liner we were to board. "Hurry up!" she exhorted as I took 5 shots of her, 4 of which she covered her face with her hand, trying to prevent an errant marshmallow from trying to steal her hat and escape. Her skirt pulled up slightly, exposing her slender thighs, and I sighed. I would miss being between them. On the other hand, not being between them had become the norm, and the fact that I hadn't had sex was unpleasant. I hoped this cruise would change that. She glanced at the watch on her wrist, the expensive one she'd bought online as my birthday present to her 2 weeks ago, right after she'd chosen and paid for this cruise. She was lucky she did, as I didn't buy her anything at all. I was in a bit of an annoyance at the time. "Come on!" she shouted. I glanced at my phone. Another 5 minutes had passed. 20 minutes before the gangway planks would be pulled into the ship. Perfect timing. "Coming, honey?" I echoed as she grabbed her purse, and I gathered the 3 suitcases together by the handles. As we approached the nearest gangway, my phone rang. I stopped and pressed the button. "Oh, I love you, Jim," came Keely's voice, loud and clear. My wife froze and turned to look at me. "What the fuck?" I said, stepping away from the ship to the other side of the wide pier, as if trying to make out the screen of my phone next to another large sign erected by the developers who had built the pier to broadcast a somewhat dubious message of how wonderful this new addition to the Port of London was. "Thank you for using it." The ad campaign turned into a meme. "Wait!" I shouted to Keely. I heard her high heels clack behind me as I approached the edge. "Is that you, Keely?" I called out, pointing at the screen, pulling her closer to me. "What the hell are you doing with your boss?" "Wait," she called out. "What the hell is this?" I turned my back to her as she reached for my phone, trying to snatch it out of my hand. She stepped around me, trying to get a closer look while I continued to turn around. I then tilted the phone so she couldn't see that the screen was blank. That wasn't really necessary. The volume was on high, and her words left almost no room for imagination. "Oh, yes, yes! Harder, Jim! Oh, yes, that's it! More, oh!" "You're such a nasty little bitch." She didn't say that. That would be weird. I didn't say it either, although I could have, with good reason. That was the voice of James McLaughlin, the chief architect of her firm. In my opinion, he was a total jerk who saw himself as the Frank Lloyd Wright of the new century and dressed in collarless jackets with purple ties that matched his overly tight pants to show off his bold originality. A more appropriate nickname for him would have been the Chewing Jerk. He even considered himself right enough to make her swear to be faithful to him by cutting me off from the bed completely. "When we have more time on this cruise, I'm so gonna fuck you," he continued, his voice breaking every now and then into intermittent breathing. "Take your idiot. Get him out of the house." "Oh God, yes, I love it so much." I stopped the sound and looked at her. Really? Her eyes were huge. I think they were wet with tears of humiliation, not guilt or sadness. I mean, it was Keely. She wouldn't admit she was wrong. Ever. "William, She closed her mouth, thank God. I started the sound clip again, noting that there was 1 minute left. More words of abject betrayal poured out into the quiet afternoon, interrupted only by the occasional cries of a few seagulls and emphasized by the deep, sleepy rumble of the ship's engines. Finally, I stopped the rant that was pouring out of my phone. "I loved you, Keely. Even when you decided that, as a manager at such a classy and prestigious company, you could accomplish so much more than someone who just played on the computer all day. Even then, even when you turned into a messenger of hell and happily spent all your time trying to make my life a living hell, even then. But when you started sleeping with him and even agreed to his demand to cut me off from sex completely, that was the end of it. He was right. You are truly and truly a horrible person, a vile, disgusting bitch. I don't play on the computer all day. I write phone apps just like the ones you have in your purse. 2 weeks ago, 2 days before your birthday, when I was just driving by on an errand, I saw you heading to Sheridan's. When you later told me you'd spent all day at your desk, I was working, not playing as you claim, and wrote an app just for you. That app is now on your phone. Every time you left your office, it quietly recorded everything and sent the file to my phone." I pressed the key again. Come on, she urged me. "Do it, you bastard!" I paused again. "It's a good thing you refused to do anything animal and humiliating." McLaughlin was a loudly proclaimed vegan, so I tried to make an appropriate analogy. In my opinion, those watermelons would have been organically grown. She blushed a lot. Her face looked like she'd been looking at the sun for a long time on a really hot day. "That's not true," I'm not, I'm not like that. Don't you dare apologize, I interrupted her. You didn't get into this situation by accident. You went into it with a map, a flashlight, a GPS, and a pack of hounds like you were hunting for some rare treasure. You planned it, you executed it, and you enjoyed doing it, attacking me again. Experiencing that feeling of superiority, you seem to crave such a thing more than air. So now you can open the treasure chest and learn the consequences. The timing was perfect. The ship always turned on its fog signal 10 minutes before it stopped landing, to warn all the slackers who were taking a long goodbye to their loved ones. When everyone automatically looked at the horn at the top of the ship when the noise started to get loud, I gave her a little nudge at the hip. She was right on the edge of the pier. Trying to regain her balance, she flailed her arms wildly, and one leg seemed to be fumbling for support in the air. And then she was gone. I peered over the edge as she surfaced. Oops. Sorry, honey, it was an accident. Ah, sweetie, I think you're gonna need some dry clothes. Here you go. I threw her suitcases into the river beside her, making sure they wouldn't actually fall on her head. I didn't want her to die. That desire had faded, though it had been huge when the app sent that first sound file. Now I just wanted her gone. I wasn't worried about her drowning. She had a third-degree water safety award hidden somewhere in the house we were renting. To get it, you have to swim a quarter-kilometer, fully clothed. She also had her own built-in flotation device on her chest. She could easily make it safely to shore and even run back to the ship. But she couldn't do it in 10 minutes. I waved my little finger at her and smiled widely as she coughed and broke out into curses at me. Whistling to myself, I grabbed my suitcase and quickly ran to the gangway. Sorry I'm late, internal crisis, I explained to a pretty woman in an immaculate white uniform when my turn in line came up. She ticked me off her list and then put an X next to Keely's name when I explained that she wouldn't be able to go because of this crisis. A crackle came from her radio and she listened to it for a moment. Go upstairs, sir, she said with a smile. You made it in time. It seemed that the moment my foot touched the deck, the boarding was complete and the gangway was retracted by smooth, quiet engines. A pretty woman handed my suitcase to the steward and gave him my cabin number. The man and suitcase disappeared as I checked in at the front desk. I really didn't notice the sound of the engines until they suddenly picked up speed and the whole ship seemed to come alive. I walked up to the observation deck and looked back at the wet figure limping along the promenade without one shoe, with her purse dragging on the floor behind her, to where the ship had been just a few minutes ago. I pulled out my phone, zoomed in, and took a few pictures of her. It was a pleasant memory. The other passengers were pointing fingers and laughing, making up scenarios amongst themselves to explain Keely's appearance. I waved at her one last time. I wasn't worried about her calling the ship, the shipping agents, the police, or anyone else. After the swim, her expensive phone and that damn expensive watch were now nothing more than jewelry. Her cards would work, although the funds to cover them were now severely diminished after I'd taken a fair share of them. The rent was paid for the month, and if all went according to plan, at that point the moving company would be taking everything I'd tagged out of the house to move into a nice little apartment fairly far from the old den I'd rented for myself. So she wouldn't notice. I marked everything I wanted with a black light pen, and the movers knew to just turn on all the lights in the house, and those marks would be clearly visible. I didn't just change the light bulbs from regular to ultraviolet. I added little drops of solder that now firmly connected each bulb to its socket. Taking them out would mean breaking the bases, so to replace them back in, she would have to have the electrician heat and loosen each drop of solder or change each light bulb. Why would she bother? Well, because I took the time to use that amazingly useful black light pen to detail her hobbies, with extensive quotes from sound files that my little app dutifully forwarded to me, to cover every surface in this house, including walls, floors, and ceilings, as well as the TV, refrigerator, cabinets, mirrors, her clothes, sheets, towels, everything I didn't want. The movers were going to have fun reading her cheating history. It was permanent ink, so every night she'd spend there, unless she was sitting in the dark, she'd face the fact that she'd been caught, that she wasn't some superior being who deserved to be on top. She was just another cheating whore who couldn't control her sense of entitlement or keep her legs together. That would drive her crazy. So she'd either have to scrub everything down with special soap, a long, messy job that wouldn't work with fabrics, or take care of repainting the whole place, as well as dealing with the lighting. It wouldn't take her long to do that. But as long as those words were there, constantly in front of her eyes, accusing her, it would drive her crazy. My little revenge. I waved one last time as the ship turned east to leave the mouth of the river and sighed. Now I had to track down Mrs. McLaughlin and give her the copies of the sound files I had promised her. She had been most interested in them when I had called her a week ago to explain the situation our spouses had put us in, and in return she had promised me anything I wanted from her on the cruise, whether her husband was around or not, which was a very interesting prospect. I had no idea what she looked like, but her husband wasn't the kind of man who could have an ugly wife. Besides, she seemed surprisingly intelligent in her rage against her cheating spouse, and with her consent, I was going to have her all week, regardless of what she looked like. After all, he had forced my wife to leave me, so I was going to make sure he experienced my full measure of revenge. It was going to be a very interesting week, and maybe even a great one. I cast one last glance at the slumped figure on the embankment. "You ruined our lives," I whispered. "You fucked him up. You fucked me up. You just fucked it up. You made me leave you, my love. That's why I made you leave all of this, Keeley. I set myself free. Sneak in unnoticed, Jack. Make a new plan, Stan. Don't be modest, Roy. Oh, just get free. Hop on a bus, Gus. There's no point in discussing anything.